war machine for you.
Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room.
Here's Johnny.
What is your major malfunction, numbnuts?
Hi there, my little droogies.
Film Church.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
There was me, that is Alex, and my three droogs, that is Pete, Georgie, and Dim. And we sat in the Carnival milk bar trying to make up our razoo docs what to do with the evening. The Carnival milk bar sold Milk Plus Velocet, or Centamesque, or Drinkrum, which is what we were drinking. This would sharpen you up and make you ready for a bit of the old ultra-violence.
Hi there, and welcome to Film Church Radio. This is the podcast that treats cinema as a religion. It's Sunday, I'm Lewis.
And I'm a droog.
And we are here to talk about movies. Each week, Brandon and I alternate picking a film for us both to watch and discuss. This week, we are continuing our 2023 director retrospective on Stanley Kubrick, where we've been watching chronologically the films of Kubrick and discussing them in detail each week. This week, we are discussing A Clockwork Orange from 1971, starring Malcolm McDowell. Before we jump into the film and other films that we've been watching this week, though, we'd like to say thank you to everyone who's been listening to the podcast and sending their love for the show, subscribing, all that good stuff. It means a lot to us. If you're new to the show, go back and check out our past episodes. We have a lot up there. Hit subscribe as well. So each time an episode drops, which is on a Sunday, you'll get it first. Just be a part of what we're trying to build, which is a church of film lovers. You can find us on all the social media platforms at Film Church Radio, where you can leave us a comment or send a message about the show. And we'd also love for you to rate and review the show on whatever podcast service you're streaming from. Perfect. Before we discuss the main film, though, Clockwork Orange, what Brandon and I like to do is talk about the other films we've been watching this week, because we watch a lot of films. And we want to give every film that we watch some kind of analysis. So, Brandon, what have you been watching this week, my friend?
Hi there, Lewis. I've been watching quite a few things, starting with The Living End from 1992. I think I had heard of this director before because John Krasinski had worked with him, Greg Araki. Mm-hmm. He's an Asian filmmaker, queer filmmaker, and I was talking to our mutual friend Zach, who's been on the show for several episodes, about this movie idea I have, and he recommended this as a watch for me. So I decided to give it a watch, and I really liked it a lot. It's a very intense queer film. I don't want to give too much away, but it's as 90s as you can get as well, which I love. Like, I don't know, like 90s, like low budget 90s movies just have like this, I don't know, unmistakable kind of feel to them, or aesthetic. Yeah. I mean, it's the style of the time and like, you know, the stuff people wear and all that kind of stuff too. So, I would definitely recommend it. It's I don't know. It's not a happy movie. You know, it's not gonna leave you full of butterflies. But I don't know. I gotta watch it again a few more times to really kind of analyze it, I guess, because I'm not sure what it is that I like so much about the movie. Yeah. At the moment, I just liked it. Yeah. The characters felt very real. The dialogue felt very real. Even the side character stuff was really good. Yeah. I definitely want to watch more of his films, and see what he's all about. Mm-hmm. I did watch another one of his films right after the one with John Krasinski in it, from 2007 called Smiley Face. It also has Anna Faris. She's the main character. Yeah. It was pretty good. It was pretty funny. Like it was a totally different kind of movie. It's kind of like a stoner movie about this chick trying to like get across town for something. The plot is very kind of loose. Like she's trying to do something the whole time, but she's like super stoned the whole time. So it kind of goes off the rails several times. But it's kind of just like a weird, quirky, like stoner comedy, but not really. It's not. I mean, it's from 2007, and that era of like comedies, I think you can recognize very easily. Like Judd Apatow kind of ruled that era, but this is not the same kind of comedy at all. You know, it feels like a totally different thing, and Anna Faris, I feel like she gives a really good performance in the movie. And she's somebody that I kind of like. She also kind of ruled that like 2000s, early 2000s era. Like it just seems like she was in every comedy. You know, you just saw her everywhere.
Around the same time as like the scary movies as well, right? Because she was a big part of those.
Yeah, she was in Waiting. You know. So yeah, I know she has like a podcast that is doing really well right now. I forget what it's called, but yeah, it made me be like, man, I wish I saw her in more like bigger films. Like,
yeah.
You know, she's kind of one of those. I grew up watching her, you know. So it was cool to see her in this. And of course, John Krasinski is great. It's like right. It is. I think it's like in between season 1 and season 2 of The Office.
Oh wow! Okay.
When he did this, and he's pretty. He's kind of like Dwight. It's like him doing Dwight almost in the movie. And then Danny Masterson is also in it.
Okay, cool.
And his part of the movie did not age well. It's a little bit. It's funny, but it's also it makes you cringe now because of his scandals. So that's a little unfortunate, but it was a pretty great movie. I didn't like it as much as the other one, but it's you know, Greg Araki's got me interested in his work, so I'm gonna go and check out more of his stuff. Cool. What else did I watch? Cocaine Bear. I talked about it a little bit last week with Jason. Yeah, it was good. Like it's kind of exactly what you expect. It was great to watch it with like I watched it I think on a Saturday opening weekend.
Nice.
And you know, people were just cracking up the entire time. It went further than I thought it would, which I like. Yeah, I think it's going to kind of become maybe like a kind of a cult classic comedy.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll do a sequel. I don't know. It feels, I hesitate to call it like really, really good. I gave it 3.5. Because it has this like almost Sharknado kind of vibe to it, where it's just like unbelievably ridiculous. But it's definitely several steps above that because of the acting that's in it. Like the actors that are in it are great. It's got Margot Martindale, of course, we talked about last week. It's got Kerry Russell, Ray Liotta. It's got the IKEA guy. From the IKEA guy TikToks. Which is amazing. And who else was I going to talk about? Oh, Alden Ehrenreich is also in it. Who it plays, you know, young Han Solo in the the Solo movie. And I was thinking as the movie was starting, I was like, I wonder if Alden Ehrenreich will ever work with Lord and Miller again, the guys that originally started making the solo
Yeah.
movie, and then were let go, and then Ron Howard was brought in, and then I saw that Lord and Miller were producers on Cocaine Bear,
Yeah.
so I was like, oh, they are working with him again, cool.
Yeah.
So I guess because I don't know, there was all kinds of rumors going around whenever
Yeah.
that whole thing happened, and I thought there was like beef between the two directors and the main actor, but I guess if there was, they worked him out, or they're,
Yeah.
those were
Yeah.
just rumors or something. But yeah, I mean, Phil Lord and Chris Miller, they're great. Like I love all of their stuff. We've talked about them before. I mean, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, the animation is incredible. The 21 Jump Street movies,
Yeah.
the Lego movie, and yeah, I mean, obviously comedy is kind of their big thing.
Yeah.
So I think it's a good watch. It's I think something everybody is going to end up seeing.
Yeah.
Like it's like the perfect kind of ridiculous premise that everyone's going to be like, what is that? I have to see it.
I know. I think it'll really hit its stride when it comes to streaming. It's got a very like 90s, noughties kind of video store feel to it. A lot of people are going to kind of pick it up and watch it, I think, when it comes to streaming.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think everybody's just going to see it at some point.
Yeah.
And then I also watched The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. Like, I love the Lord of the Rings movies. I grew up on them, read the books when I was a kid. And normally my go-to is the first one. It's my favorite, The Fellowship of the Ring. But I was just like, well, who was it? It was when I started working at Alamo Drafthouse. They one of the guys I was starting with, we were all talking about what our favorite movies were, and he said that The Two Towers was his favorite movie, and brought up a bunch of points, and so yeah, I just decided, let me watch this.
Yeah,
just put it on, for 4 hours, and it's amazing. It's incredible. I love all of these movies so much. So,
yeah. That's great.
Nothing but good things.
I need a big rewatch at some point. I feel like it's been quite a few years since I've actually watched one. So needing to go back and watch something,
Yeah. Yeah, man. I've watched them so many times, so now I'm just like, just put one on every once in a while.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's like comfort.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like, it's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
So what have you been watching, my little droog?
I have been carrying on with the Criterion Challenge, which I talked about a few weeks ago. So I've watched a few kind of like films that have been on my watch list for a while, which has been good. I finally watched my first Fellini film. It's taken me a long time to get around to it. I watched La Strada from 1954. Fellini. It's basically about a girl that kind of becomes part of this circus family, and like it's very Shakespearean in like the tragedy elements of it and kind of where the film goes and what it shows, very realistic and dirty and messy and all the kind of things you want from an Italian film from the 50s. Yeah. And it's the main performance from Giulietta Messina is so influenced by Chaplin, it kind of threw me off guard a little bit. Yeah. She pretty much plays a female version of Charlie Chaplin throughout the whole film, and I think it's very obvious that she's doing it. And at first I was like, is this working? But it really works. I think straight away you get the kind of the tragicomedy that Chaplin was so good at, and I think that's the reason they were doing it, to kind of to get across this feeling without having to say it. We know what kind it's very much like The Tramp. The kind of character that they are from the opening scene. Yeah. And I just loved it. I just had a really good time with it. It was very well made, a great story, and yeah, I mean, going to be watching a lot more Fellini I'm sure, this year, because this really worked for me.
Heck yeah.
Which was great. And then I watched Carnival of Souls from 1962. A bit more of a horror film. It's kind of like, I think it's 67 minutes. It's really short.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, the premise is interesting, but apart from the premise, there's not much there. And there's a few really startling images in there and like scenes that really are like, oh wow, that's pretty good. But you can tell it was made on a really low budget. And like I said, apart from the main premise, there's not a lot going on there. It wasn't a film that I enjoyed, I don't think. When I finished, I was like, okay.
Yeah.
But
the poster looks cool.
Yeah, that's it. Like, and I think that's kind of it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I had to watch it in 2 parts just for life.
Yeah.
And then maybe that took away from it. I think that seeing it in one sitting would kind of keep the ambience going.
Right.
But yeah, it just left me a bit cold. So
yeah.
One to revisit, I think, but not one that I particularly liked.
Yeah.
And then I rounded out the week. I watched The Kid Brother from 1927, a Harold Lloyd silent comedy. Watched quite a lot of Lloyd last year, and when I was doing, just reading up on him, it seemed like this was one of his favorite films.
Yeah.
So I got a chance to watch it. I don't think it's my favorite Lloyd. I think that there's a lot in there where there's not, it's not the same filmmaking as Chaplin and Keaton. Whereas with Keaton, there's a joke coming like every 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And with Chaplin, there's a lot of heart. Whereas with Lloyd, it's a bit more plodding. I guess it's hard to I don't want to play it down, but there's a lot more like character building, I guess. There's a lot more, character moments. And I mean, there was some really inventive and funny parts, and it does work. It is a strong comedy. It's just not my favorite Lloyd.
Yeah.
But one that I'm glad that I've ticked off.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, I mean, we went back and watched the new Star Wars trilogy.
That's right. Yeah, I saw that you were doing that. Is that because you started watching The Mandalorian?
I think it was part of it. I mean, we had been talking about, the last trilogy a little bit, me and my wife, and she was like, I don't think I've seen the last one like that much at all.
Yeah.
The Rise of Skywalker, because I know that I'd seen it in cinemas a few times and I watched it when it came out on home video and stuff. And I was like, I'm not really that sure I want to go back and revisit it,
Yeah.
But one night we were like, okay, let's do it. So we started off with The Rise of Skywalker and we watched that. And then we went back and watched the 2 preceding it. And Rise of Skywalker, I mean, my bugbears are still there. I'm still not on board with the way they take the story or the characters or anything like that. It feels, I don't know, it just doesn't, I don't like it.
It was just so off.
Yeah.
I mean, just bringing the Emperor back was just like, what is this?
Yeah, exactly. And it makes me annoyed more than anything.
Yeah.
Because I feel like the Force Awakens and Last Jedi are great. Both of them I have a really good time with. I know that The Last Jedi has its critics, and I can see why. I can. Not everything in there does work, but I mean, compared to the terribleness of...
Well, I mean, it was just like the first 2 movies just kept building up to something, and it was like, okay, last one, we're going to get all the answers, and it was like, what? Yeah,
not those answers. Because I think that the first hour of it is really fun. It's like this good fashion Star Wars planet to planet, kind of thing, and then it just loses me, which is a shame. But... I'm glad I've gone back and rewatched them. Wanted to do that at some point. Kind of pull the Band-Aid off.
How do you feel about Mando right now? I've only watched the first episode of season 3, but...
Yeah. I mean, I just love having it back in my life. It's like such a Saturday morning cartoon.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and they've just like hit their... I mean, they hit their stride a while ago, but like just seeing it come back and like that opening sequence where they show up together in the ship. Yeah. You're just like, man, this is just...
Yeah.
Perfect.
It's just, it's what I want. And I don't know how they can top last season, because I feel like especially the last like 4 or 5 episodes was just like, banger. It was just so good. And I'm interested to see where they're going to go, what else they're going to pull into, because, we're getting not too close, but I mean, we're still, there's still a lot that they can build on. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Because we've got, I mean, young Han Solo isn't too far away, I don't think. So I'm hoping maybe Darth Maul will show up at some point.
Yeah.
Because he was at the end of Solo, but I mean, this is just speculation. And like,
well, this is post. This is like a few years after.
Oh dang! Yeah, I got that completely
Jedi.
wrong. Yeah,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
no, I got that wrong. Yeah,
yeah. I don't think Darth Maul's around anymore.
No, yeah. I'm thinking. I got my
But we've got. I mean, we still have the Ahsoka show coming, which is going to be around the same time period.
Yeah.
I mean, and Luke is still out there, and like
he is. Yeah. Who's he trying?
Yeah, it's like who knows what they're gonna do with it.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm excited to see where it goes. It's a 30, 40 minutes of TV that I really look forward to every week. So
yeah.
I'm sure we'll talk more about it in the upcoming weeks when it really starts getting
it gets
going.
more intense.
Yeah.
Yep.
Perfect. Well, I think with that, we're going to go into our feature presentation. A Clockwork Orange from 1971. The letterbox summary is: being the adventures of a young man whose principal interests are rape, ultraviolence, and Beethoven. And the summary is: in the near future Britain, young Alex DeLarge and his pals get their kicks beating and raping anyone they please. When not destroying the lives of others, Alex swoons to the music of Beethoven. The state, eager to crack down on juvenile crime, gives an incarcerated Alex the opportunity to undergo an invasive procedure that'll rob him of all personal agency. In a time where conscience is a commodity, can Alex change his tune? We've both seen this before, I believe, right, Brandon?
Yes.
When did you last see it?
I've only seen, before watching it for the show, I'd only seen it once.
Yeah.
And I saw it like more than 10 years ago. Like maybe even closer to 15 years ago.
I feel I was the same.
Yeah.
I can remember watching it while I was in my final years of secondary school. So like high school.
Yeah.
Because of the controversy around it.
Yeah.
But I don't think I've watched it since.
Well, was that around the time that it was starting to make circulation again? Because it had been, I think it had been back. I think it was the 90s that it started kind of coming back around. Yeah. And then after Stanley died, it was like, re-released or something.
Yeah. But I just knew that it had been banned in England for a long time, and that like Kubrick himself had banned it.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, like either this is going to be like really incredibly like out there, or Kubrick was so embarrassed by it that he didn't want anyone to see it, which isn't the case. But like my young mind was like, either way, this is something I need to see.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it's been a while from that until rewatching it. Did you remember anything about it?
It's weird. Like I definitely did remember things about it.
Yeah.
Like things that just stick with you, and then you're just like, I don't know if I can go back to that movie. Because of the, I can remember the feeling that I felt watching it more than, specific images or, real specifics, I guess. It's like the opening shot is like unforgettable.
Yeah.
Because it's just, Malcolm McDowell's look and the style, the eyelash, the narration, and the long pullback shot into this milk bar with these weird female mannequins, with their boobs out where you get the milk from, is like, it's such a shocking, bizarre opening that you're just like, what am I getting into?
Yeah.
And then, I remembered, of course, that there's like rape scenes and they're just like sickening to watch. but I forgot like kind of the way that everything plays out, and like forgot that like in the first 10 minutes like is the most horrible stuff.
Yeah. It doesn't give you a second to kind of sink into it. It's straight from the off.
Yeah. Yeah, so I was very unsure of what I was going to think about this movie now, because basically all I could remember was the movie kind of made me sick. I didn't understand it. And I was just like, it basically in my mind I was like, okay, that's one of the darkest movies ever made.
Yeah.
Be careful going back to that.
Yeah.
So I was just really unsure of what I was going to think this time, and I liked it a lot more than I expected this time around. I think because I've got a lot more life experience. I'm older. I kind of understood the film a little more of what he was trying to do. I understand cinema history a lot more. Yeah. I mean, like, there's so many crazy things about this movie. Like, this movie could not have been made at any other point in history. I mean, the early, like the first few years of the 70s are some of the craziest shit you'll ever see in your life. Yeah. Like, I mean, Pink Flamingos was what, 72? Mm-hmm. Like, this was like when cinema was just let loose. Like, the Hays Code was gone. The rating system was just now being created. And it was like, okay, we can do anything. We can put pornography on screen. We can eat shit on screen. Yeah. It was like the reins were let loose and everything went so far out there, and then eventually got pulled back in a little bit and kind of found its like middle ground, I guess. Yeah. But the fact that this is like a studio made film where they let Kubrick do whatever he wanted and it was released in cinemas, like, blows my mind. Yeah. I know. It's crazy.
Insane. I know. Yeah.
And I'm sure we'll get into, what the film's about and kind of our thoughts on it and stuff. But I'm not quite sure. I'm interested to see what you think, because it is still a very disturbing film. Yeah. But the way that it presents the subject matter it's very interesting. I'm hesitating to like get too far into it because we kind of just started talking about it. But yeah, like what was your reaction this time?
Yeah, I think like you, I had very strong images from this film, and probably just because you've seen them a lot anyway. Like the with him with his eyes kind of clamped open, and them sitting in the milk bar, and them driving in the car, and the giant statue of a penis, all that kind of thing. I feel like I've seen a lot. Yeah. So going back to it, I was probably not as I don't think it. I don't know. It's hard to say. I don't think that I was kind of skeptical about going back to it. Just more like, okay, let's see if this is, how it plays out from my memories, I guess. Yeah. And I think comparable to what we see now, it's still very like shocking, but I don't think it's in the same. I think it's more mental than it is showing you.
Yeah, for sure.
Whereas now when we see something like this on a film, it's very kind of graphic to the point of it takes you away from it. Whereas with this, it's more of them like playing with the victims, in terms of like mentally. Yeah. That's the real like shocking part of it. And just the need to go and do it, Yeah. Yeah, I think, and then again, the flip side of it is when Alex is incarcerated, that side's shocking as well. Mm-hmm. With his eyes clamped open, it just looks like the most horrific thing. Yeah, it's it's such a juxtaposition between the two that there's not a respite from the feeling of unease.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
You know, you come out of it a bit unsure of what to make of it. I don't think I love this film.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's hard to be like, I love Clockwork Orange.
Yeah.
You know, I can understand the themes and I can understand what's trying to be said through the film. But again, with Kubrick, I mean, with Lolita, he's picked another novel that is very hard to translate onto the screen.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know why. I mean, I probably do because no one else could probably do it. But, you know, it's hard to get this across in the same way as the book, I'm sure. Because the book is, you know, it's all in kind of the droog speak and
right,
all that kind of stuff, and yeah, it's weird. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, the thing that caught me this time around was it. After he goes through the whole rehabilitation process.
Yeah.
And they're showing off him on a stage. You know, the doctor is like showing that he's not going to be violent. Like, first off, that whole sequence is kind of sadistic. You kind of get the sense that, these people on the moral side are kind of just as sadistic, you know, in like putting this guy through it. I mean, especially like you see the prison guard like smiling while he's like suffering or whatever. But then there's the line where he's like, he will be your true Christian boy, or he'll be your true Christian or whatever. And there's the whole question, you know, the priest comes up there and there's the whole question of like free will. Yeah. And, you know, whether or not that matters. Yeah. And, you know, I kind of like that's kind of where it clicked for me. I was like, oh, like this movie is about right and wrong, like good and evil, and like what that means, and what free will means. And like, I mean, kind of going back to this theme that Kubrick has started of like man, you know, that he did with 2001, where like man evolved from an act of violence. Yeah. Yeah. And so that's kind of like in all of us. So that theme is kind of there, but also this theme of like choice and free will, where like I've heard so many Christians in particular talking about, you know, arguing against atheism and saying, like, what keeps an atheist from raping? Yeah. And it's like, okay, is the Bible what keeps you from raping? Like, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because it's horrible. Yeah. You know, because violence is horrible, because raping is horrible. Like, that's what keeps people from doing it, not because the Bible tells them not to. Yeah. So like that, when that kind of clicked for me, I was like, oh, this is a lot more interesting than I remember. Yeah. Yeah. And I think leading on from that as well, the thing that struck me this time is just the representation of good and evil, or the representation of like evil people, you know. In terms of Alex himself, he's a huge fan of Beethoven, which is kind of like a joke, but when you think about it, like classical music is seen as a high art, you know. It's kind of what it goes along with intelligence. You feel like it's, you know, shorthand for people that are intelligent, listen to classical music and have like a real passion for it, and like upstanding citizens, you know. And it's just like, you know, just because it's not a case of someone having the same traits as everyone else as being evil. Yeah. You know, anyone could be evil. Yeah. You know, and it doesn't necessarily rely on what you like and what you don't like, and what position you're in, and, you know, or how it's dished out. Yeah. We also got the sense with Alex in particular that, like, okay, if, you know, it's like, it's really disturbing to kind of just follow him throughout the entire movie.
Yeah.
But like if he was a prince, like if he was Joffrey from Game of Thrones, it would all make sense.
Yeah.
You know, you would kind of love to hate him. You know what I mean? It's
exactly.
like he's just despicable. But because he's like in this modern / futuristic world, and he's just like a regular dude.
Yeah.
It's like so much more disturbing.
Yeah, because you want him to like get better. You know, that's the thing. You want him to get better. And I'm like, where is this compassion for this awful character from? The first hour of the film he is just like vile, you know.
Yeah.
But you still are rooting for him to not be brainwashed, I guess.
Yeah.
It's weird. It puts you in a weird position as a viewer of how to react. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a huge credit to McDowell and his performance. Like he comes across as this very childish boy, you know, and you know, you get the sense that he's not. I mean, you get the sense that he's a psychopath, but you also get the sense that he just has not grown up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very bizarre. But then you go into, you know, when he goes into prison before they rehabilitate him, he's like trying to be a good boy and stuff. And he's reading the Bible, and it goes into the sequences where he's just in love with the violence and the rape that's within the Bible. Like, and that's why he's reading it.
Yeah.
And yeah, throughout the whole thing, you kind of are hoping he'll get better, but he just doesn't.
Yeah. I mean, it's the whole yin and yang thing. You can't have one without the other. Like, as far back as, you know, as we can remember, these things have been a part of our society, unfortunately, even to the Bible. And it's kind of, you know, like you said, he's attracted to those things in the Bible, and they're there. You know, they're in there. Yeah. It's not like I read the Bible, so everything in there is, you know, preachy. Like, terrible things happen in there too.
Yeah.
And I think that's the, you know, that this does happen in our culture still.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a mind bending 2 hours.
Yeah, it is. A few of the things that so I watched some behind the scenes stuff, and I've also been reading this book from David Mickix?
Yes.
And every time I'm like, what's this guy's name? One of the things that he quotes in there is from a psychiatrist, Emmanuel Schwartz. And he's talking about film in general here. Okay, just like basically any movie. Like, pick any movie, and he's like, we've seen so many times that the body of a film serves merely as an excuse for motivating a final blood-crazed slaughter by the hero of his enemies, and at the same time to release the audience the guilt of enjoying this mayhem. A Clockwork Orange, unlike most Hollywood products, makes the audience feel guilty about enjoying it. The guilt gets mixed. Yeah, anyway, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but like the guilt gets mixed with the pleasure while you're watching it.
Yeah.
And so you feel like the whole time you kind of have this, like you said, this yin-yang weird, disturbing feeling, but like also it's nothing we haven't seen before in other movies.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You know, and it's like... It's just that quote is so on point, because it's like, when you think about it, it's like, yeah, like every hero of a movie, the first 2 acts are just excuses so that you get on this protagonist's side, to where at the end he just goes after all the people that he needs to
go after,
you know, for justice or for revenge, or, you know, he's somehow justified in our minds to just commit mayhem on his enemies, right?
Yeah.
And that's the weird catharsis that filmmakers do. I mean, so many movies do this to where you're like, yeah, kill him.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. And I mean, in terms of anti-heroes, you know, film noir especially, You know, in there's a lot of people that we're rooting for that are not good people. You know, and I'm like, well, what is the difference between them
exactly
and the droogs? You know, apart from the rape that we see.
Yeah.
You know, are we conditioned that violence is okay, but like that's not, you know, or like, or is that how films are kind of portrayed? I guess it's a conundrum.
Well, and then by the time you get to the end of the movie, and he goes back to this writer's house, and then the writer realizes who he is because he's like singing in the rain in the bathtub. And then the writer starts to mess with Alex and torture him with the music. You know, that's a moment where you almost, in a normal movie, you would take pleasure in watching Alex be tortured. And this guy kind of getting his revenge because what happened to him and his wife was so horrific. But then you get that shot of him just taking all that pleasure in, as he's like hearing Alex suffer. Yeah. And it just makes you sick again. You're just like, this isn't right. This isn't good. Yeah. So I think there's a lot there's a lot in this movie that works. There's a lot in this movie that is it's challenging. Sorry, I almost fell. There's a lot in this movie that is challenging the status quo and challenging what it is that audiences want and get out of cinema. Yeah, it's literally pushing the walls of the form to be like, oh, you like this? Well, how about I serve it to you? How about I serve you dessert first? Yeah. And then you get your main course, and then you get your appetizer. How does that make you feel? Yeah. And it's I don't know. It's unlike anything else, I think. Mm-hmm. That's for sure. Because other movies that are this disturbing don't really say anything.
No, exactly. And the disturbing is the selling factor. Whereas I think for this, the things that are disturbing aren't the thing that you should go and see this film for. Yeah. It's the comments on society and capital punishment and rehabilitation and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Exactly. Which I don't think you expect going into it at all.
Yeah. Some other interesting things about this movie, I think, are that like it just kind of blows my mind that this is. I mean, it's like you said, like after Dr. Strangelove, Kubrick has a totally different kind of career and trajectory. Yeah. So this almost feels like his second movie, even though it's like his eighth or something. Ninth. Seventh, eighth, ninth. Yeah. It's his ninth. Mm-hmm. So like, it's just crazy that these movies were successful, for one thing, because they're just so out there and boundary pushing. Yeah. But just that like he did 2001 and then turns around and does this, and it's like, where is this guy coming from?
Yeah, exactly. What's going to be next? You just can never. I mean, we've seen that the first few films, there's those overarching themes of war and kind of the hero struggling against, the patriarchy and stuff like that. And I guess to a certain extent, this falls into that patriarchy theme. But yeah, it's just they just feel so far removed from what we've already seen. Yeah. The filmmaking's different, the shots are different, the characters that are presented are not characters that we're familiar with. Yeah. Everything is just different and like heightened. And it's what's made them what they are. It's what's made Kubrick so talked about, is because it's not the same. None of these work on the same level as the last. Yeah. And you have to have I think as a casual viewer, it's hard to kind of go from one to the other. You have to have a real love for the art form to be able to jump like that. I think. And I'm not saying that you can't watch these films and enjoy them, but I think to look at them all, it's hard to jump from one to the other.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, one of the critics in the behind the scenes stuff was saying that at this point Kubrick is no longer referencing other filmmakers or looking at what other people have done. He's now just deep into cinema and referencing himself and just pushing to the next level. Because you get that when you see whenever Alex goes into the record store and you see a 2001 album there, you're like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Which also brings up the point of like how he uses, classical music in both of these movies are totally different.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's undercut, some of the worst images by this, transcendent classical music in here, and just, and Alex's love for it.
Yeah.
It's, it's mad. I mean, the effect that it had on the public is immense, and I think it's probably, I don't want to say that Kubrick was. I mean, his wife said that about 20, 30 minutes through the film she felt physically ill, but she admitted that was the point. So I think that he wanted this outrage. But I mean, in 1974, Arizona introduced a bill which became known as the Clockwork Orange bill, which proposed to protect prison inmates who volunteered for therapy programs. So that was, put in place to make sure that this kind of thing wouldn't happen to inmates, which is a good, it's a good thing. But then also there was a lot of bad things that happened because
of the movie. Yeah,
people, for some reason, thought Alex was a hero and wanted to dress like him and act like him, and and especially.
Well, I mean, he's having so much fun.
Yeah, and he looks great. Like you said, like that opening shot is so iconic.
Yeah,
you can't. It's the costume and the McDowell's performance as well. It's just like it is magnetizing.
Yeah. It's the same thing that happened after Reservoir Dogs. Is like everybody started, dressing in black suits with skinny black ties.
Yeah.
And those guys aren't anybody to look up to.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just like it's like I said, this movie could not have been made any other time, I don't think.
No.
But it's also 1971. This is just a few years after like the Manson murders.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a time where like these young hippies were committing horrible acts of violence and people were scared.
Yeah.
I'm sure it just felt a lot more real. And there were some like copycat crimes.
Yeah. Especially in England, weirdly. Yeah. Which I think is part of the reason. I mean, I wanted to get onto why Kubrick banned it in England himself. I mean, he had just made the move just after 2001 to come and live in England with his wife. And I think she said something about how when they were leaving America, there was a lot of talk about the wars and like kind of depression and kind of what was going on, especially against Russia. I don't know if the Cold War was still going on, but towards Vietnam, possibly at this time. American history is a bit spotty. And then when she said when they landed in England, they turned on the radio, pretty much expecting to hear the same thing. And they got a show about gardening and like how to keep your flowers alive. And it was kind of like that, like, okay, we're in a safer place. Not a safer place, but we're in a place where these things can't infiltrate us on the same basis as they do in America.
Yeah.
So I think that Kubrick felt a very real responsibility to England in kind of keeping it like that, I guess,
Yeah.
And when these copycat killers started popping up and people started, imitating the droogs and dressing like them and attacking, women, he decided that he was going to pull it and not let anyone see it in England. And it came to the point where a British TV channel made a documentary on it and showed, around 20 minutes of clips on it. And he sued them because he was like, no one should see this film.
Yeah, that is crazy. It's crazy that it got to that point. I mean, I guess it was just, I don't know. It would be so interesting to hear what he would think about it now.
I know. Yeah, I mean, I know that the ban was eventually lifted. You know,
Yeah.
people could go and see it again. But yeah, I mean,
because even the other book that I read, Stanley and Me, that's like written by his assistant. Like it sounds like he didn't like to talk about A Clockwork Orange. Like anytime anybody would bring it up, he'd just be like, change the subject.
I think that just seeing what the effect it could have on the public, he kind of went the wrong way, I think. And, it probably plays into the mystery of the film where you're supposed to, nobody's the good guy to the point where people were idolizing Alex and the droogs.
Yeah.
And I can imagine that, especially as a filmmaker, like how responsible you should feel.
Yeah.
To do that. And it's, I mean, but again, sending it underground means that people are going to find different ways to try and track down the film. And
it's going to become, just
more
like
than
a mysterious legend.
Yeah, exactly. You've got to take the gravitas out of it. And unfortunately, like removing it from circulation is not the way to do that. It just adds to it. But yeah, I mean, the reaction to this film is insane. And I think we see it a lot now of, there's a lot of times where people get obsessed, like with Taxi Driver. I can't remember the guy that became obsessed with like Jodie Foster and stuff. There's a lot of times in film history where films have influenced people the wrong way. And you get back to that age-old discussion of, should films be responsible, or, should this be something that they're taking in like notice of, and if not, what can be done? I don't know. Because I think it's the person that sees it. I don't think it's the film that influences people. I don't want to dress as a droog and go around killing homeless people, but some people, it will just speak to them, won't it, unfortunately, and be the catalyst they need.
Yeah.
I feel like we're getting into the deeper topics of film criticism now.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a question that you can't really answer it,
No, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you can see the way that the mass responds to film, but they don't always respond the same way.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I don't think it's my favorite Kubrick. I don't think it speaks to me on the same level as some of the other films that we've seen.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is I think rewatching this has kind of sparked a new interest in this movie that I didn't have before, where I'm like, I want to kind of learn a little more about it and really, because like I said, it's like that. I think that it is saying something very important.
Yeah,
that that free will does matter, and people's reason, for being good matters as much as the act of being good itself.
Yeah.
Of course we need laws in place.
Yeah.
Of course we need regulation and all of that stuff. But if the fact that murder is against the law and you'll go to prison for it is the only reason you don't kill people,
yeah,
you're not a good person.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I mean, I just find that really interesting. So yeah, it's not my favorite Kubrick film either.
Yeah.
But it's definitely gotten a lot higher than I expected it to be before I rewatched it.
Yeah, and I think that like you said, it's tough because the other films that we've watched, especially earlier, are just like a fun to sit and watch. Where this is not, and it's not.
Right.
It's not like I'm going to put this on to relax at the end of the day. It's like I'm going to put this on and kind of it's going to say something about society and human nature.
Yeah. It's not comfort food. It's not. the two
No.
towers.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not. It's yeah. I mean, enjoyment factor always plays a part into it, and I think that while what it's trying to say is super important and is very deep and philosophical, the enjoyment factor for me just drops.
Yeah.
As the film progresses, which is probably part of what we're trying to do as well. It's not. Part of it was like sitting like Alex with the eye clamps.
Mm-hmm.
You're forcing yourself to keep watching it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, yeah, because he's basically watching the same thing that we're watching.
Yeah, exactly.
He's seeing these horrible acts of violence put to Beethoven.
Yeah,
and
so
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a very layered movie.
Yeah,
but it somehow touches as all great films do, it touches some kind of like basic core, like basic simple morality question.
Mm-hmm.
And so I mean, because of that, I think it works. But it's also one of those movies that I wouldn't necessarily recommend you watch it until you're like maybe in your 30s or something.
Yeah, I think you've got to be out of that. Be able to read the subtext.
Yeah.
So that the images aren't going to deter you away from it, I guess.
Yeah, and even if you watch this, when you're older, I don't think you're gonna get everything that first watch anyway, because there's just so much.
Yeah,
it's like watching it this time. I was kind of bracing, so it's like.
And I think it's like we both said when we watched it the first time, we could vividly remember things from it, but not necessarily the message.
Yeah, exactly.
It was like the mask with the nose and the car and the outfits and stuff like that. So
there's some interesting behind the scenes stuff with this movie too. If you watch the features and stuff on the Blu-ray. Malcolm McDowell, kind of like him and Kubrick just hit it off. They were kind of like buddies the whole shoot and stuff, and he kind of expected that to kind of continue on. But like after this, like Kubrick like never called him.
Yeah.
Which is kind of sad to hear, but it's also I mean that probably had something to do with like Kubrick's kind of unease with how everything turned out with this movie and stuff.
Potentially, and he was becoming a recluse at this point as well.
Yeah.
He was. There was stories of he hired a driver, but wouldn't let them drive over 35 miles an hour, just because of how worried he was about getting into an accident. He had a pilot's license, but he didn't like to fly.
Yeah.
All these kind of things where he was just like slowly just retreating back.
Yeah.
And I guess part of it was to make him feel comfortable, McDowell, to give a performance that he wanted. There's that like air of, I can trust this guy. And then he's used him, he's moving on. Yeah. So, but yeah, that's,
One of the things that they would do when they were recording the voiceover of McDowell's character, it took them 2 weeks, but they would take breaks and go play ping pong. And then months later, McDowell's agent was like, "Hey, you haven't been paid for these 2 weeks for doing the voiceover." And he was like, "Oh, well, I'll see Stanley soon. I'll ask him about it." And then he was like, "Hey, Stanley, my agent says I haven't been paid for these 2 weeks of voiceover." And he like pulls out this pocket notebook and he's like flipping through it and he looks at it and he's like, "I'll pay you for 1 week." And he's like, "What?" And he's like, "The other week was ping pong." Just like such a like, I don't know what to call that. It's like, what do you even say? It's like, okay.
Yeah. Fine, I guess. Yeah. Oh, dear.
I mean, it's like you wanted to play ping pong.
Yeah. Yeah. I know that McDowell, had a few brushes with death while making this film as well.
Oh, really?
The scene where they're holding his head underwater. When you go back and watch it, it goes.
Yeah,
it
dude,
doesn't
I was thinking
break.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, this is such like did they slow this down or
No,
but then I was
yeah.
like, it doesn't look like it. Cause
Yeah.
he's underwater for so long.
Yeah. He almost blacked out while doing it. It was like to the last second where they pulled him out. And when they were putting the clamps in his eye, it came very close to scratching his retina. And
Yeah.
there was just...
There was a point, I think, in the behind the scenes stuff they're talking about that where he's like he literally did start to freak out and tried to like shake loose. They have him in a straitjacket, so he can't like use his arms. And he kind of shook too much and the thing just like scraped his eye. And it's like, jeez.
Yeah. And I think that's something that, I know we talk about Kubrick, but McDowell's performance and like the things he went through to get what they got cannot be overlooked. It's absolutely, it's committing fully to the part and like trusting in the vision, it's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else you want to say on A Clockwork Orange, Brandon, before we move on?
I don't think so, man. I think that's I guess I could go on and on. Like there's like a lot of, I mean, the set design, the costumes, all of that stuff. Like I'd have to kind of look and see, compare other movies. Like I don't know if like that time lapse scene where he has like the threesome and like the music is sped up. Was that like the first time anybody had ever done anything like that?
I think that partly was to get past the censors. I think because it did get an X rating, which in America is kind of like associated with like porn films, which they really didn't want to. So Kubrick tried to like speed that up and put the music over the top of it so that it would feel like you weren't watching what you were watching.
Right. Yeah.
But they were like, no, we can still see, the bits that would make this an X rated. So
yeah. But I guess he cut it down enough to get an R, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, X-rated just meant that it couldn't be shown in some cinemas. I mean, some cinemas wouldn't show X-rated films, so the distribution was cut down, and there was a few religious groups that kind of condemned it and said not to see it.
I can't imagine why.
Yeah, and there's a very strong letter that because there was a certain town, I can't remember which one it was, that basically were like, we don't want this being shown in our town at all. And Kubrick was like, the fact that you're coming in to ban media is the whole reason why I'm making this film.
Yeah.
Like, you're not allowing freedom of speech or people to make up their own minds. And he made a very long comparison to Nazi Germany as well. Which I think, again, same with Kubrick throughout the whole thing. He's still fighting to get his films seen by people.
Yeah,
it's still fighting this battle that we've seen ever since Paths of Glory. So
yeah,
but yeah, I mean, thankfully it's available in true form now. We can watch it kind of whenever we want. So
yeah.
Cool. Okay, do you want to guess what we'd rate it on Letterboxd?
Yes. This is a hard one. I'm gonna say, I don't know. It's hard to say because I feel like you don't like the movie as much as me at this moment. But I feel like you still probably gave it. I want to say 4, but maybe 3.5.
Okay, and because you said that probably didn't like it as much, I'm going to say you gave it 4.5.
All right.
Yeah, I gave it 4.
Okay, I gave it 4.
Okay, cool. Okay, great. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I think, like we said, I think there's a lot in here and I can understand the message and I get what he's trying to say. And it's made incredibly well, as always. But the enjoyment factor just, I don't want to go back and watch this straight away.
Yeah.
Yeah,
for me, I feel like this film is saying something important that I tried to articulate it the best I could on this podcast, on this podcast, but yeah, I think I need a few more watches to really be
Yeah.
able to say
Yeah.
why.
Yeah. And that's good. A good film should always leave you wanting more, or
Yeah.
wanting to learn more about it,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think apparently the book actually ends with Alex becoming better.
Okay.
Like he does make a choice to be good.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily think that's the right
No.
direction. Because I think like from the film, you get the sense that he's just evil. That he's not gonna change.
Yeah.
And, not to say that people can't change, but it's like, I mean, if you rape and murder people, like you're not. I don't
Yeah.
know.
No, I know what you mean.
It's like you should be in prison at
Yeah,
least.
exactly.
Like
Yeah.
you got to pay for those crimes.
Yeah.
So, oh yeah, the other thing was Anthony Burgess, the guy that wrote the novel. He kind of wrote it in a drunken frenzy, based on something similar that happened to him and his wife.
Yeah.
Which I think is a very interesting. It's a lot more disturbing, but it's also it also kind of makes you realize that the film is saying something maybe that you're not catching the first time you watch it, or you wouldn't expect, is that this film is written by the victims.
Yeah.
And the victims putting themselves in the shoes of the character, of the person that committed these crimes. I think that just puts a totally different
spin on it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a different way to look at it, because it's like, this is, I don't know. I don't know how to describe it.
And I know that Burgess got really frustrated as time went on of people keep coming to him to try and justify the film and explain it, and he was like, "It's not mine to explain. It's not my film. It's Kubrick's. You should be asking him." And obviously, he was very tight-lipped about anything from this point on, really. Yeah. So people kept coming to Burgess, and I think towards the end, he just got very frustrated with the fact that he had to explain it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I can. Yeah. I mean, it's also like you're putting your trauma out there.
Yeah.
And now you're having to talk about it constantly.
Yeah. Exactly. Oh dear. Shall we do the ranking? Where do you think it's going to go? I think probably lower than I expected, potentially.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's a good question. Because all of these movies are good.
I know. Yeah, I know.
Man, it's really hard to say. I feel like, on the one hand, A Clockwork Orange is on a different level.
Yeah.
Than Passive Glory and Doctor Strangelove and all of those. But I also just enjoy Passive Glory and Doctor Strangelove, watching them.
Me too.
A lot more.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so maybe just under Doctor Strangelove.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah,
that's what I was thinking. I think the Killing, as much as I love The Killing, this is saying more and is a better made film. But I think that's a really good place to put it.
Yeah.
Okay, coming in at number 4, Clockwork Orange. So from bottom to top, from number 9 we have Fear and Desire, 8 is Spartacus, 7 Lolita, 6 Killer's Kiss, 5 The Killing, 4 Clockwork Orange, 3 Doctor Strangelove, 2 Paths of Glory, and then number 1 is 2001: A Space Odyssey. Will it ever be moved from the top spot? We'll find out. Maybe next week. What are we going to be watching next week, Brandon?
Next week, my little droog, we're going to be watching Barry Lyndon from 1975, a film I have not seen. This will be the last Kubrick film I haven't seen.
Yeah, I'm excited to tick it off and get it watched.
It's going to be crazy.
Yeah.
It's going to be wild.
It is. And I think that brings us to the end of the show. You can find the show on Twitter and Instagram at Film Church Radio, and you can follow us individually on Letterboxd. Brandon is at Selman Scope, and I am at Walker Lewis 3007 to keep up with what we've been watching in real time. We also have all of our back episodes streaming on all good podcast platforms. Please leave us a rating and review so we know if you liked the film, if you didn't, and what you would pick for us to watch in the future. All that's left to say, though, Brandon, is... I don't care about the dangers, Father. I just want to be good. I want for the rest of my life to be one act of goodness.
The question is whether or not this technique really makes a man good. Goodness comes from within. Goodness is chosen. When a man cannot choose, he ceases to be a man.
I don't understand the whys and wherefores. I only know I want to be good.
Amen.
Amen. Say your Film Church prayers.
See you next week, Sunday.
Bye.
Bye.